what you have prepared. Yes. Yes, that's good.
Namo, Namo, can you hear it? Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo, I bow. I bow. I come down to earth. I feel humble. I feel grounded. Namo. Namo tassa. I feel grounded thinking of him, thinking that there has been someone like that. I feel grounded thinking that there has been someone like that. Namo tassa. Bhagavato. Someone like that, someone who had so much to share, who had it all to share and shared it. Arahato, who was up to the challenge of life. Samma sambuddhassa, who was wide awake and understood perfectly. So that's the result of my education in the context of a rather different Buddhism or Buddhist learning far away. And I think that there are different educations and different Buddhist learnings, all of which work and converge. And let's talk a little bit then about what we might gather from this conference of the important things we can think of in India today. So first of all, I'll try and say something about Dr. Ambedkar's legacy, because that's the context in which we've set ourselves to address this whole issue. Then we might say something about the two sides to education, the technical and the other one. Then what's Buddhism like in a scientific age? It's different from Buddhism 500 years ago, or 2,500 years ago, surely. And then we might, if we have a bit of time, say something about scientific thinking from a Buddhist perspective. Okay? Okay, so Dr. Ambedkar said, educate, organize, and agitate. Let's rephrase that. Let's learn. Let's teach and learn. Let's coordinate. Let's get ourselves together so that we can do things effectively. And then let's exercise the influence that we gain by that means. And it starts with learning, teaching and learning, education. So I think the thinking, let's just get the thinking behind his suggestion, the context for all that we're doing here. India, from then and now, is modernizing, and modernization imposes certain basic requirements on a society that the society cannot escape. If you're going to modernize your society, your economy, all of your structures, then you're going to have to bring the good people forward. You need meritocracy. And meritocracy is something that didn't come naturally in the old Indian culture, perhaps. It was very fixed, it was very superstitious, it was very conservative, it was very static. So he saw, Dr. Ambedkar, I imagine, saw that there was an opportunity here for the excluded people whom he represented. They would have the chance to gain the learning, the understanding that would propel them to positions that India needed them to be in order to modernize. They would then gain influence. I'm having trouble seeing my own slide. I have to turn around, right? They would gain positions, and therefore they would have influence, and they would be able to use the influence. And then came the key question, what would they do with the influence? If they gained influence, would it be to any good effect? And how would it be possible for anybody like Dr. Ambedkar planning this great promotion of the equality within the Indian society, how would it be possible for him to help the previously unequal sections to use their influence effectively when they achieved it? And I think that's where Buddhism came in from a purely pragmatic. He was a practicing politician. I mean, that's where he starts from, that's where he finishes. And we understand that he had a genuine Buddhist commitment, and that he was saying, we want to be and do good, we want to be better people and do better things. And at the same time, he was looking at that from the point of view of how he would sell it, how he would present it in a practical context, and therefore he was thinking of Buddhism in terms of using the influence wisely. Let's go. Okay, so modern scientific education is all very well, but as they say, it's value-free, it's functional, it's designed for a purpose, so it's going to allow you to produce X out of Y. It's an education to do things. And we can see from the fact that our scientific culture is running the earth and its species, including ourselves, very fast over the cliff, that this isn't perhaps enough by itself. It's got all sorts of things that we very badly need, and we don't want to reject the rational empirical basis of it, but by itself it's clearly not working, and it similarly wasn't going to be enough for the people whom Dr. Ambedkar suggested education to. Now, Buddhist culture was the right other thing to bring into the mix for a number of reasons. For one thing, it didn't have the negative attributes of the cultural heritages that might be an alternative. For instance, what's loosely called Hinduism, which seemed to many, and Dr. Ambedkar particularly, to involve a lot of superstition, a lot of blind faith, and a lot of stick-in-the-mud attitudes. Buddhism, by contrast, was adapted to the rational, empirical world that we're now operating in, and that's what we've said earlier on. But it also brought, much more importantly, certain very strong positives, of which I would think the first one was, and a very important one for us to think about, is humility. Namo tassa. I feel humble, and it grounds me, and I'm okay that way, right? And I don't have to feel that I've got to make my point so strongly, because otherwise I'll get lost, because I'm okay. I'm okay. Humility is one way of looking at equality. If I think about equality, I might think about I'm equal to him, but I might also think about he's equal to me. There's nobody I can look down on, and it's not going to help me if I did. So I can look eye level. Humility is not looking up. It's looking eye level at everybody and saying, yeah, here we are. Good, let's go forward. So then there's, if we are here together and we want to go forward, we're going to go forward together, because if we're not, we're going to fall over, you know. In any situation, if you don't work with the people with whom you are in the situation, it just happens you're there with them. If you decide, I want to be somewhere else, these shouldn't be the people I'm with, you're never going to get anywhere. It doesn't do you any good. Live with it. So, to look at altruism, we may say this is a great ideal, somebody's telling us I've got to be better. No. It's just You do yourself good if you think about it long term, if you're looking out for what's good for everybody at the same time. Civic responsibility, that was a big thing. India lacks civic responsibility. Look at the streets, they're all a bit not quite as tidy as they might be, etc. There are a lot of other things that are not quite so tidy as they might be. Altruism, let's get to it together, brings a certain civic responsibility. That's the point of Buddhism in education. And that's why he stressed the Bodhisattva ideal, I think, although he was so strongly into the Pali. So there are two sides to education, and the education that we are looking at possibly in this context too. There's the professional and the personal, the practical and the, what you might call ethical or psychological, and there's the scientific and the Buddhist. And the question is, how do they fit together? And my key point that I'd like to suggest to us today is that they don't just bolt on. It isn't just, yes, you've got your scientific, your technical, your professional education. That's what matters. That gives you the advancement. And then you've got to have this little add-on thing, you know, the foam on the beer, we'd say in England, the sort of ancillary element, which will ensure that you use your position wisely, the ethical component, the moral, the psychological, the Buddhist component. No, the two absolutely have to fit together. And this is quite challenging because science is science. It is what it is. You try and tell scientists that, you know, there's a Buddhist perspective, and they'll laugh at you in many cases, and they'll have certain reasons for doing that because, you know, facts are facts, and evidence is evidence, and logic is logic, and you don't change them just because you have some sort of emotional commitment to something that happened long ago. Okay, right. Similarly, Buddhism is Buddhism. You know, you don't walk along the path with your head in the clouds thinking that you've got the scientific formula for it. Because no, you have to walk along the path, right? Fine. We start there. That's good. And at the same time, we have to go a bit further. Chinese Buddhism isn't the same as Indian Buddhism. It's both Buddhism, but when it got to China, it was in a different cultural environment, and you had to make it work in that environment, and gradually, over a long period, they found out a way to make it work, which was Buddhism, and it was Chinese, and it was not the same, right? And you've got the same thing in science. We won't go into it very much, but at the moment, there's a great crisis in the theory of evolution. The fashionable theory is dying or dead, and we need a new one. And it's interesting to notice how Neo-Darwinism, as it was called, the theory that's dying, played differently in different cultures. It always played very well in the English-speaking cultures, and it never played very well in the French-speaking cultures, and it's from the French-speaking cultures that much of the renewal is coming. So there is English-speaking evolutionism, and there is French-speaking evolutionism, even though science is science and doesn't change. Okay? So, if we're thinking about how we teach Buddhism in a scientific age, we have to think about Buddhism, which is the texts largely that we're teaching, and how do we relate to our texts, our cultural heritage. There's a standard way that comes with the air we breathe in India, and we can call that the bhakti approach. It's been in the air we breathe in India for quite a time, 1,000 years easily, but it's not been there forever. It wasn't there around the time of the Buddha. Bhakti is not time immemorial India, definitely not, whatever some people might say. Well, perhaps there's another way of respecting the tradition without going for this hysterical devotionalism, this everything is there and I just have to yield to it completely idea. Perhaps we can respect it in the spirit of the Buddha's injunction, Atta-dipa, atta-saranahota, bhikkhave. If you're looking for a share in this, you've got to look after yourself. You've got to stand on your own 2 feet. Quite scientific in its way. There we go. So we have to understand that the text is a human. Let's go back one. The text is a human construct. It's not. Yes, it's the Buddha Vajna, in the sense that if we are going to get an idea of the words coming down to us, we're going to go through that text. But it isn't word for word what the Buddha said. It's a human construct that was made up over a long period of time by many people with different interests, and it was a political compromise. Ashoka put it together with a civil service behind him. I mean, let's look through it to what it tells us and gives us, not at it and bow down to the front, the words. So it's a human concept, and we want to look for a usable understanding, usable for us here now, rather than a perfect understanding that is timeless. It's akalika in the sense that it's always there for us if we look for it. It's not timeless in the sense that there is something reducible to a set of words which was fixed in that way at that time and is now exactly... No, forget that. Nowhere near. All right? Okay, well, I'm not going to get through this, but I've just got a story to tell you about attitudes to learning and learning about, for instance, old texts, Buddhist texts, and then making something of them in the world now. It's a story from a very good Indologist. He was a Tamil grammarian mainly, and he went to do a research thesis in an area in South India. He gave himself 2 years to do that. He went there, set himself up, looked around, introduced himself, and soon they took him to the big man in the area, and the big man said, "What are you here for?" And he said, "Well, you know, there are these different texts in Tamil grammar from 2,000 years ago, and I'd like to look at certain inconsistencies between them and see which was first and which was second and how they got put together and so on." And the big man said to him, "Oh, I see, okay, fine. Well, I can tell you what to do. You go and see him. He knows. He'll tell you." Oh. 2.5 years? Go and see him. No. But there is this idea that if there is a question, there is a right answer. And if there is a right answer, then somebody knows it. And what you have to do is you've got to find the person that... No. Critical thinking, scientific age. So we're going to not look for the correct understanding of Buddhism, this text, the Pali Canon generally. We're going to look particularly for what we don't understand in the text. That's how the scholarship that now informs our understanding of the texts developed, by looking for what wasn't clear, exploring hypotheses about how it might become clearer, and then seeing how you could test them by comparing and analysing the language use and so on and so on. So a usable understanding isn't the correct understanding. It can be correct in terms of the spirit. It can be what takes you next on your road, a road that can be in the spirit, the path. And you can tell that by talking with other people and so on, but it doesn't mean that it's exactly identical to what everybody has done in the Guru Shishya Parampara since the beginning. It doesn't work in a scientific age. Buddhism isn't algorithmic. You've got the idea of algorithms, do this, do that, and the other thing comes. No. Algorithms like computer programs. Instructions, result. Always happens. There's another form of computer program, heuristic programming, where you just try and see, and then you feel whether that does the right thing, and then you try again with the feedback. And that's more like, that's how you set life along the path. You find your way. Remember Deng Xiaoping, who ruled China? They asked, I've got 2 minutes, I've got it there. They asked him for his policy. What's your policy? Tell me your policy. And he said like this, I'm going to have to move. He said, when you're crossing the river, you feel for the stones. When you're crossing the river, you feel for the stones. So that's what we want. We want to find our way skeptically, cautiously, taking the feedback properly from what happens, with saddha in the sense that we have confidence that we are going to do, everyone, ourselves included, some good by working with this material, do as much good as we could possibly do, by working this material with this material and this tradition, if we do so sincerely and humbly, so we have confidence, but we don't have to know the answers. We don't have to tell ourselves we've got it right. You don't ever get it right. You get it less wrong, and you get it less wrong bit by bit by trying sincerely